My listeners, I greet you in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. I am back with the second episode of our pre-understanding of the Bible. And it is very important. I told you that we are covering the period from the time God withdrew his righteousness to a period when he brought it back to us. You see, that period is a very important thing. God decided to come in the arena as if he's a football player, to play the game according to human culture, which was understandable in those days. Culture was a very important thing, and God knew it. God came prepared to go into the culture until someday he will lead us to victory. The first culture God had to reckon with was to become a homestead God. I want you to imagine with me a whole creator of the entire universe. Please, the owner of this very planet, to condescend so low, you see, to come so low to a level of becoming a homestead God, to come so low. And in those days, the implications were, if you become a homestead God, it is the only place where you can operate. You don't operate beyond the homestead, the homestead of that particular house. Now, God is going to be a prisoner. You see? Yes. The commander of the whole universe is going to be a prisoner in just a homestead. Now, let me make myself clear, and I would like to make myself very clear, that when God came to the homestead of Abraham had his own God. And Abraham was a very rich man. He was not a poor man. He was very rich. To know that he was rich, he had 100 men who were his bodyguards. 100 men of war. The work of these 100 men were to guard Abraham and his property. And I want you to get that very well. In the culture of those days, there was no this element of strategic planning, somebody who know how to handle his cash. There was no saying that he's very brilliant in terms of making a business. It was always one answer when a homestead was very rich, that God, the God of that homestead, is very good and is very powerful. And that led to several people coming to you and say, could we have your God as our God? Because we see that he's a performer. You know, they had a yardstick on which they stand to measure performance. We see that he's a performer. So we are ready to check our God, and then we can have yours. One of the gods who are performers before God, the God of heaven came to the homestead of Abraham, was Abraham's God. He was a very good performer. God made it so, you see, so that he may make a point. But one day, before we go even that far, if you have 100 men in those days who are under your command, let us be conservative enough and give every man one wife, which was the difficult, as we will see in their culture. That means that makes 200 people at your homestead. Give each house one child conservatively. That is 300 people. So Abraham was commanding over 400 people, by the way, or more. So he was actually chief. That's why, let alone wherever he will visit, he will be visible. Even if Pharaoh of Egypt knew that he has entered his territory because of the entourage he was having. So Abraham was already a symbol of covetousness of his colleagues who were with him or who were living with him on that same village. You see, he was doing it very well. Now, God of heaven comes. I will not say his name for now because by culture in those days, homestead gods had no names. They were just beginners in kindergarten, and so they had no names, you see, yes. And so he comes and then he says, I want to be your God. Two things are happening here. Already Abraham's house, there was already a God who was performing very well, you see, by the standards of those days. Number two, no God we know of anywhere reading the literature of the ancients, and I have read a lot of literature of the ancients, you see, yes, and that's why I took even my education. No literature of the ancients testify that gods can come and ask a homestead that they should be their God. The gods in those days, you got them yourself. But this time, God comes to Abraham. And we don't know how Abraham reacted, you see. The only thing we know is the agony God caused Abraham by coming, by saying so. Because in order for Abraham to accept this new God, he had to chuck or to remove the other God who was already performing very well. And so chucking a God who is performing very well, it was a scandal on the village and that small town. Since Abraham was already very popular, it was news and it was a story to tell everyone. Abraham has chucked his God. Why? We don't know. For some reasons, he has embraced a new God. How does the new God look like? But his God was a performer. Why do you chuck a God who is a performer? Everybody in that small town blamed Abraham for that reckless action because the God he chucked was not in the bracket of non-performing gods. The culture allowed to chuck the non-performing gods. Then people began to come